Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 143. Reach for the Stars. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're talking about the story told in the 1984 movie, The Last Starfighter. How are you doing today, Mike?
I am doing wonderful today, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And what's new in your writing world?
New in my writing world? Well, not much this week. I'm wonderful today because I had a kidney stone that I was dealing with last week, well, after we recorded the last episode. So that kind of put a damper on my week. I didn't get much done.
Oh my goodness, I would say yes.
Yeah, so that was not fun to go through. But
No.
I think I'm in the clear now, well, hopefully.
I'm so glad.
Yeah,
Oh,
when
that sounds
that
awful.
pain is gone, it's just like it feels amazing. Like, oh, I can breathe, my
Yeah.
body can relax. So that's why I'm
Oh,
doing
no.
well today.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Relax. My writing world is going pretty well. I have cleaned up a couple of those chapters in Umbra, which were, messy word dumps, and started a new chapter. So I'm at about 10,000 words, a little over 10,000 words so far,
Cool.
which I'm
Excellent.
pleased with that progress.
Yeah.
And how about movies or television? Have you found anything interesting lately?
Let's see. What have I been watching or reading? Nothing super. I've been listening to podcasts again more recently. So I haven't been listening to an audiobook the last few weeks. No, I don't think I've encountered anything that we haven't already discussed before over the last week. Have you?
I started watching the Ghosts episodes again. They put a pause in the release of episodes
Yeah.
for the Olympics, and so then started them back up again. So I am now caught up on Ghosts. And I was under the impression that season 5 was going to be the last season, but apparently not. They're
Oh,
going to keep going. Yeah. So that's kind of fun.
yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that show.
It's still a lot of fun, still maintaining that good combination of comedy and heart that it does so well. It's been fun to watch.
Excellent.
Finished watching Star Trek Starfleet Academy, so I'm done with that. And in anticipation of watching the movie Project Hail Mary, I am not rereading the book, but I am rereading The Martian.
Oh, cool. I never read The Martian. I've only read his Hail Mary book. I would like to read Artemis since they didn't make a movie about it, and I'm not familiar with that story at all. So I might.
Yeah, I haven't read that one either. But I did enjoy The Martian. I do enjoy The Martian enough to reread it. And I did enjoy Project Hail Mary. So perhaps Artemis should be on the list sometime in the future.
Yeah.
Are you ready to talk about The Last Starfighter?
Yeah, let's dive into this.
Today we're talking about the story told in the movie The Last Starfighter. And I will read the overview that comes up on Google. After finally achieving the high score on Starfighter, his favorite arcade game, everyday teenager Alex Rogan meets the game's designer, who reveals that he created Starfighter as a training ground for developing and recruiting actual pilots to help fight a war in space. Whisked away from the banality of his trailer park life to a distant alien planet, Alex struggles to use his video game playing skills to pilot a real ship with real lives at stake. Did you enjoy this movie?
Yeah, I like this movie. I saw it when it first came out in the theaters way back in the day. As a kid from a small town, we all have that sense of wanting to do something bigger with our lives at one point or another. And I think this movie spoke to that and still speaks to that. It gives us a good setup for this character right from the beginning, the longing for, a new life, a broader life, maybe some adventure, wanting to make a difference in the world. I think it sets that up pretty well. And obviously, I think there are a lot of parallels here with Star Wars. I'm sure it's heavily influenced from that movie and that series. He feels kind of like Luke Skywalker in a lot of ways, right? It's like small town kid looking to get out of, his little place and do something bigger. So yeah, it has that kind of setup. It's obviously inspired by that. And I think it does a pretty good job of getting us into that character pretty quickly, getting us into a situation. We see, he's good at this video game, but he's also clever and skilled enough at things that everyone in his community wants him to fix stuff. So, they set that up pretty quickly. We see him helping people, even when maybe he'd rather be doing something else that he would find more enjoyable. So they kind of set that up as part of his personality too, which comes into play later. And I like this concept. I just like the concept, especially having grown up with video games, that there's this game out there that says this training/recruiting device that pulls you into this larger world. I think that's really cool. One thing I noticed watching it through this time, which I don't remember from when I saw it as a kid, because I was a kid and really not in tune with this stuff, but there's a fair amount of early computer graphics in this movie, and obviously the CG is very simple. This is one of the early movies that used it. Nothing is even texture mapped. Not that that means anything to someone who doesn't know about video games or animation, but it's all very simple graphics. I think it holds up well in the sense that it comes across like it was filmed in a way that works with the action. It's not just slapped on. It seems like it's part of the movie, but it's definitely very primitive by today. I mean, modern video games just blow this out of the water, but it's old movie. But anyway, getting back to the story, yeah, I think this is the idea that anyone can be a hero, right? He's just an ordinary kid and he goes on this amazing adventure. And I think it is a bit cheesy now looking back at it, but at the same time, I think that's part of its charm, is that it doesn't get too serious. It maintains this sort of balanced tone where it's kind of this everyman on an adventure. It has a very 1980s feel to it. A lot of movies around then have this kind of feel where it's trying to be fun and exciting and still tell an interesting story with some character development, and it's sort of a familiar quest kind of story that I think works pretty well. I love the fact that the main character gets replaced by a clone. I thought that was a really cool idea. This was fun. Adds a different element to the story, because that certainly didn't need to be there. It could just been they took the kid away and that was it. I thought one thing that stood out to me was his refusal of the call. There's this idea in or the stereotypical, hero's quest, adventure quest type story where the character is called to this adventure, right? And then they refuse it first. And then eventually they take it back on. And a lot of times I feel like that's sort of overdone in stories. It's there just because someone told the writer that it was supposed to be there. But in this case, it makes complete sense. He gets into this place where it's like, okay, he's going to go on this adventure, and then finds out he's basically going to go to the front lines of a war. He's like, I don't think so. I mean, that's a completely reasonable response. So I think it really worked in this case. Sometimes it's, I don't want an adventure, or I can't go, or, my parents need me, or whatever. And this is, I don't want to die in a war. So I think we all can relate to that. So I think that aspect of it worked well. And then I liked how, he ultimately steps up to the plate and then goes back into his normal world for a bit at the end. I like that they had a proper falling action to the story after the climax, and then a resolution where we get to see the wind down from the combat, and then him, briefly reunite with his people in his community before, continuing on to his new life. So I like that they gave us that at the end of the story instead of just sort of cutting things off as some movies do. Yeah, overall I thought it still holds up pretty well. I think, well, we'll talk about things that could be improved when we get to that section. But overall, I still enjoyed it. I think there's a core of something fun here. What about you?
It's interesting because I did not see this when it came out, and that surprises me because I usually, just sort of gravitated to anything science fiction.
Yeah.
When it came out in the movies.
I'm surprised you didn't see it.
Yeah, so I didn't see it and had not seen it. And so it's a shame because I wonder if I would have enjoyed it more back when it was first released because, again, you're right. It came out not too long after the third Star Wars movie. The third Star Wars movie came out in 1983. And so this came out shortly after that. So it was capitalizing on that. And we were seeing more science fiction, though not to the degree we see today. Today, it's like completely awesome how much science fiction we can see. I do think it did a fantastic job. And you pointed it out about, really relating to this story as a kid from a small town. And I think it really did tap into a very prevalent zeitgeist, a spirit of the time. People who played video games and wanted the opportunity to share those skills in some way and be whisked off into space to fight in, space fighters. I think there was a very much a spirit of that for people who enjoyed science fiction. I certainly would have loved to have gone off and flying an X-Wing fighter. That would have made me very happy.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of wish fulfillment storyline really tapped into the spirit that existed at that time. And what's really interesting is that it appears that this film still has sort of a bit of a sort of like a cult classic standing.
Yeah.
Which means that wish fulfillment spirit still exists today, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it really tapped into something very important that people can relate to, like you related to. So I think that's really cool. I thought the story was a little thin. And so, it was hard for me to stay as engaged as I might have 40 years ago. I don't even want to do the math about how long ago this was. I do appreciate that the female in the story had a bigger role than you usually see in a story like this. A story that's focused on his, getting whisked away and going to become a starfighter. She actually played a bigger role. She was a very believable support network for him that made his decisions to stay and then to go really resonate because they were done through the lens of there's also her I have to be thinking about. And I really appreciated that. I think that made, his refusal of the call make a lot of sense. And then his acceptance of the call make a lot of sense.
Yep.
And I appreciate it. I think they wove that in really well. She was not just for show or he's got a girlfriend, let's throw a girlfriend in there. They really made her a character in the movie that helped with his character arc. So I really appreciated that. I thought the special effects were fascinating. There was a little note on when I watched it that said that they were created like this is the first film, I think if I read it correctly, that used Cray effects. So from like the Cray supercomputer?
Supercomputers, yeah. Possibly. I know Tron was the first one to use CG as far as I remember. I don't know if they used like Cray supercomputers or what they did in that movie. But this one, yeah, they did a lot.
And I may have misread that. I saw, I was trying to watch the film. So.
Yeah.
So as a writer, is there anything that you might have changed in this film?
Yeah, there's definitely stuff that I would change. I think there's a core idea of a movie here that's good. Like you said, the story's a little thin. I would like to see that fleshed out a little bit more, kind of going through the storyline. Some of the things that stood out here, a small one is when everyone gathers around, they're so excited to see him break a video game record. that does not strike me as reality, even for the time, maybe especially for the time. People didn't care about games. No one would be that excited about it other than him and his brother. I forget who's the little kid. I don't remember if he was a brother or not. His brother, okay. And but most people didn't care about games. They wouldn't care about someone getting a high score at a game. That's ridiculous. And I don't think it really even worked in the story. I think it would have been better if he had had like some impossible task, right? Not just beating the high score, but like finishing the game. And it's something that, is well known that no one had ever done, kind of like in Ready Player One, right? When they first figure out that first task, like no one's ever done it. It's been years, right? He's the first one to do it. I would still have his community members be pretty much disinterested. He's like all excited. His brother's excited. Maybe even his girlfriend's excited. But they're like, whatever, And then at the end, it would make their turnaround a lot sweeter when they're cheering his return and they see what he's become, right? You would see that change in them as well. I think that would have worked better. It would have made that final moment even sweeter. So that's something I would change. Small thing. I would have had him react more strongly to being launched into space and seeing aliens at the first, when he first sees what's going on, kind of like the people in Galaxy Quest, how they were all freaked out. I would have expected something more like that. Yeah. He was relatively casual about everything that was going on. So I would have expected a stronger reaction. Again, not a huge thing. And it's kind of like you said, it sort of represents the zeitgeist of the time, whereas like people just kind of rolled with things in these movies. And then having the aliens hunt Alex at the trailer park felt a little bit weird once they were there. And it's like, he's obviously not in the fight anymore. He has no ship. He has no technology. It's like, he's gone home, right? You could just let him be and move on with your life. That seemed a little weird to me. Like they're intent on killing this kid. I think you could have done something more interesting here. Maybe not have him return home all the way home. Like he leaves, but then he learns what happened to, the other fighters and he turns back to join into it. I think I would have rather had more screen time and story time spent on what he's doing in space versus having him come back out home and have a discussion there and sort of reintegrate with that plot line. I think that plot line was kind of its own thing, with his double there. I think he could have left that. And it would have given more time for something else, which I think was missing in this, which was I wanted more back and forth in the battle before he became the last Starfighter. It seemed kind of dumb to have all the Starfighters in just one small base where, they blew up the base and now that's over. Like that doesn't seem very strategically sound. So I would have had multiple bases maybe, and then, they're being attacked and they're losing Starfighter bases left and right. And, there's already battles going on that maybe we get to see, and then have it build up tension to him being the last guy alive to fight this battle, right? We also see some maybe winnowing of the enemy forces to kind of explain like, okay, there's a fight going back and forth. There's losses on both sides, but this side is basically getting devastated. So that it all comes down to him at the end. And we really build up that tension. Like, oh my gosh, he's the only one. And we see that, we get to feel that. And there's more strategic things that are happening with the commanders on both sides. Like you said, it's very, very thin right now. It's kind of like, there's this battle, and then all your starships are destroyed. Now it's just you. It just goes so fast. It's not really believable, and it doesn't invest me in a lot of stakes. Like the stakes are there, kind of, but it's almost to a silly point. So I would take that more seriously. I would make it a broader conflict that we get to see more of. And I think, nowadays, obviously, we have the ability to do the effects for things like that and to spend, more time and energy and resources on doing that kind of thing. So it might be a reason why they didn't do it back then. I don't know. But it would be a chance also to learn more about the races involved in the war, what the motivations are, what caused these conflicts. It's all very thin right now. And I would like to see more time spent on that so that when we get to the end, we've really built up what the stakes are and, the the tension with it's all on his shoulders. And then at the end, the Death Blossom thing, right? I remember that being really cool when I was a kid. The Death Blossom, where it's like and he shoots all the people around him, and it's cool, but it's also a bit of a press this button to win kind of
Yeah.
kind of story element. And I wanted to see his character really come out in that moment. We talk about this where it's like leading up to the climactic moment, or at least in the final act, we should see the hero's transformation. And in the actions that they perform, it shows evidence that they have transformed themselves and gotten over whatever block they had at the beginning of the story mentally. So I wanted to see that. I wanted to see him have to struggle there at the end. Maybe there's some kind of, he has to strategically do something clever or skillful. He has to sneak in and be stealthy, have to take a few different steps to get in amongst the enemy or something like that, where it's like, again, you're building the tension of that moment. So it feels like it's an impossible task. And then you can still have something like the Death Blossom. He barely pulls it off at the last second. So we can really cheer for him in that moment. I think that could be built up a lot more. So generally, I just feel like a little less cheesy, a more modern script, more time spent to the battle and the setup of these different factions and the development of his character. You can make a good reboot if I think with doing that. I think there's a core something here that's good, and it is kind of this cult classic, but I think it also lives in that moment where it's a bit of a nostalgia enjoyment at this point, more than this is actually a great movie. I think it's there's a core of a good movie here that could be great, but for me, I think there's a lot of work that could be done to get it to that point. All right, I'm talking too much. What are your thoughts?
I think you actually just really hit it on the nose, because the real flaw of this story is its world building. There's great world building for him on Earth, and virtually nothing for him out in space. And there needed to be a lot more work done with that. And because there wasn't that much world building done there, we have a lot of the sort of weak spots that you pointed out. One of them that I pointed out was that all these sub characters that we met were all two-dimensional. It reminded me of Enemy Mine.
Yeah.
When we had all those sub characters that we could have just plugged anybody into those positions and it wouldn't have mattered. And it felt the same way here. And I think one of the things that I noted from a plot perspective was also related to this sort of not as much world building as could have been done. And that is, for me, that refusal of the call took too long.
Yeah, way too long.
Way too long. I think Centauri should have explained to him exactly what was going on, and he should have said no right then and there. I'm not going with you. And then have had something happen where he had to change his mind and go up, and then spend a lot of time figuring out how to be, because when you were talking about how his character arc could have grown, I was thinking there could have been a maneuver in this game that was really tricky that he mastered, that then he had to do again at the end. Because when you are doing a video game and you're standing there with your hands on the toggles and the buttons, that's all you're doing is this hand-eye thing. But when you're sitting in a cockpit of a ace fighter that has a three-dimensional component to it that requires you to have the ability to handle firing while your vehicle is moving your entire body, he should not have been any good.
Right.
So having that sort of stumbling block that he then overcomes using a skill that he did have with the video games would have been really cool at the end. I think that would have been a lot of fun.
That's perfect. You're right. I wanted to see more struggle with learning, the real systems. As it was like 1 minute of shooting some targets and then he's good to go.
Yeah. So, and that would have then seen sort of two moments of struggle for him. First is the refusal of the call, and then is changing his mind, and then realizing that even though he was the best at this video game and got called into space to be a pilot, he wasn't actually any good at it because he needed practice.
Yeah.
And I think that would have, I don't know, I think that could have really then given it a lot more depth. Yeah. So I agree with everything that you said. And
Yeah,
and
I also
I chalk that up just with a really that I think could have been fixed with a lot of world building.
yeah. Yeah, I like the things that you pointed out as well. If he had defeated the video game, if he had gotten to like the final boss or whatever, 100 times before and failed, and then it's like he finally was in the flow and defeated it. Then when he was, like you were saying, when he's actually out in space and he gets to like this final moment, he's like, you know, he hears the voice of Centauri or someone's like, you've got this, and he's like, I did this one time out of 100 on a video game, and you expect me to do this in real life, then it would bring that out like, oh yeah, that's right, this is crazy. And I don't feel like we got any of that. Certainly not in the climactic moment. It was like drive up to the middle of them, push the button, we win, and that was
Yeah.
Watching it again, that was such a disappointment. I remember really liking that moment as a kid, but to me that does not hold up. And you're right. Yeah, the world building was very lacking, and it felt like the first act was extended almost through halfway through the movie. So I think fleshing it out more and adding those things would have helped a lot. So yeah, I agree.
Did you derive any themes from The Last Starfighter?
I wrote down a few quotes from this movie that I think kind of point toward a theme. One was, if that's what you think, then that's all you'll ever be. Another was,
Yeah.
don't be such a wimp. And the third was, when it comes, you have to grab on with both hands and hold tight. And I think all those things point to the theme. Like sometimes you have to take a leap and step up for something greater than yourself in order to find your true calling. That's what I got.
Nice. Yeah. And I have something very similar, which is reach for the stars, even if it feels they are too far away.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So as a writer, what do you take away from The Last Starfighter?
Let's see. Mine was something that, resonated with me in this story, and I think still does in a lot of, not just movies, but books. Like a lot of times you see this in fantasy stories, certainly for the quest stories. Don't underestimate the longing for something bigger, when you're setting up your hero, right? We see that in Star Wars and The Hobbit and lots of stories. I think it's a very powerful, way to pull someone in and have them be able to relate to the character.
Yeah. I actually pulled something very similar. It's just another way of looking at what you just said, which was capturing the spirit of a reader's needs and wish fulfillment. It can be key.
Yeah, it's almost the same thing. That's true.
Yeah, it is almost exactly the same. Yeah. Thank you for joining us as we talked about the story told in the 1984 film, The Last Starfighter. A huge thanks to our Patreon supporters and all our listeners. If you like behind-the-scenes craft notes and what's coming next, you can subscribe to our newsletters. Find the link to Mike's newsletter on michaelgrayford.com and get a free story by signing up for E.W. Barnes' newsletter. And those links are in the show notes. The Stories Told podcast is on all major platforms. Please like, subscribe, or follow to help us reach more story lovers like you. For book, TV, or movie suggestions, subscribers can drop a note on our YouTube channel. Join us next time as we talk about the story told in Star Trek Starfleet Academy. Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was nice to hop in the Wayback Machine again.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.